Federal documents, newly unsealed this morning, reveal a detail that could reshape Wendy and Eddie's entire fraud investigation. For weeks, the world has been talking about the 40 credit cards and the bizarre aliases, Pam Oliver, Eddie Hennessy, but what investigators discovered behind those transactions suggests a much deeper operation. According to sources connected directly to the case, several of the most suspicious charges weren't made months before the burglary. They were made days before the alleged break-in, while the couple was supposedly out of the country. This revelation has stunned the Bravo community and raised the question nobody was prepared to ask. Was Wendy still orchestrating financial moves while federal agents were already watching? What unfolded this morning didn't feel like housewives drama. It didn't feel like a Bravo storyline. It didn't even feel like regular legal trouble. It felt like something else entirely. The kind of moment where entertainment headlines collide head-first with federal crime. Because that blurry footage showing a woman who looks shockingly like Wendy Osefo being escorted by armed federal agents might not be fan speculation anymore. And what the FBI just revealed in a newly unsealed filing has shifted the entire timeline of the Osefo investigation in a way that nobody, not viewers, not bloggers, not even Bravo insiders, saw coming. For days, the internet has been circling the same details: 40 credit cards, multiple aliases, an insurance claim that never added up, and prosecutors who seem to know far more than they're letting on. But what investigators are quietly piecing together behind the scenes may be bigger, darker, and stranger than anything that has made it into the headlines so far. Let me break it down, because this isn't just about a staged burglary anymore. This is about a timeline that just got completely blown apart. Until yesterday, the working theory was simple. Wendy and Eddie supposedly staged a burglary at their home in Finksburg, claimed nearly $500,000 in designer bags and jewelry were stolen, and filed insurance paperwork while vacationing in Jamaica. Then prosecutors hit them with 16 charges: fraud, conspiracy, false statements. But then came the financial records. And this is where it gets unsettling. According to the newly unsealed documents, the same ones prosecutors fought to keep sealed while they built their case, Wendy and Eddie did not simply have a lot of cards or multiple accounts. They had approximately 40 different credit and debit cards, spread across personal accounts, business accounts, and, most suspiciously, alias accounts registered under completely fabricated identities. Pam Oliver, Eddie Hennessy. Names the internet is already dragging through the mud. But prosecutors say these weren't just cute fake IDs or random nicknames. They were allegedly created for one purpose only: to mask their identity during large, suspicious transactions. Investigators say these aliases appear repeatedly in purchase trails connected directly to jewelry stores, luxury boutiques, and online marketplaces. But here's where it gets even more bizarre. Several of these suspicious purchases, the ones prosecutors say will help establish motive, happened long after Wendy claimed these items were stolen in the burglary. Meaning, either the thieves returned thousands of dollars of luxury goods out of the goodness of their hearts, or Wendy and Eddie were refunding items they told insurance companies had vanished. That alone would be shocking. But then came the next reveal. For weeks, Wendy's lawyers have argued that the charges have inconsistencies, that the state made a clerical error, that the documents didn't match the timeline, that prosecutors were on a fishing expedition. And normally, in a fraud case, that might work. But prosecutors responded with something that changed the entire tone of the case: evidence of excessive spending tied directly to the couple's growing debt. According to the state, the Osefos' businesses, including Eddie's highly promoted Happy Eddie cannabis brand, were drowning financially. Not the picture Wendy painted on the show, not the carefree entrepreneur storyline, not the glamorous professor life. Behind the scenes, investigators say the couple was allegedly delinquent on multiple accounts, relying heavily on credit card cycling, making large luxury purchases shortly before the supposed burglary, returning items quietly, using aliases to protect their names from future liability. And then, the prosecutors made a statement that froze everyone reading. The amount of debt owed jointly, individually, and by the businesses is highly relevant to motive. In other words, the alleged staged burglary might not have been about a break-in at all, but about a financial collapse that Wendy and Eddie were trying to cover before it became public. But if that wasn't enough, prosecutors dropped something else, something people were not ready to hear. Remember that infamous part of the indictment, where investigators said they found stolen items inside Wendy's own home during their search? A lot of viewers didn't understand the significance of that. They thought it was sloppy. They thought the police were reaching. But according to the new filings, officers didn't just find items. They found jewelry, high-end designer bags, pieces valued in the tens of thousands, items the Osefos specifically claimed were stolen. Goods allegedly returned for refunds before the burglary date. This wasn't just suspicious. This was a forensic contradiction. Because if Wendy claimed these bags and necklaces were gone, yet they were, sitting in her master closet, and previously returned to stores before the burglary, and also appearing in charges tied to Alias accounts, then insurance fraud isn't just a possibility, it becomes the most logical explanation. But here's the part prosecutors emphasized. Some of the most incriminating transactions tied to the aliases happened while Wendy and Eddie were allegedly in Jamaica. And that changes everything. Because if the couple was out of the country, then who made the purchases? Who did the returns? Who moved the money? Who accessed the Alias accounts? This is the moment the FBI stepped in. Not because they believed the burglary was fake, but because the digital activity suggested the possibility of a coordinated, multi-person scheme. And that's exactly why the footage of a Wendy lookalike being escorted by agents caused such chaos online. Because it wasn't supposed to happen this early. Not before December 2nd, when the judge reviews the subpoenas. Not before Wendy's reunion filming. Not before prosecutors outline the full motive. But here's the truth nobody wants to admit. Investigators already have more than the public knows. They've had it for months. And now, with the financial timeline shifting again, with Alias accounts tied to purchases that contradict the entire burglary story, with 40 cards traced back to returns and refunds, with alleged lies about PayPal, Venmo, Cash App, and with the FBI officially involved, the question is no longer, did Wendy do this? The question is, how deep does this operation really go? And as part 1 closes, the documents hint at something even darker, something prosecutors haven't publicly discussed yet. The possibility that Wendy and Eddie were not working alone. And that's where things take an even more startling turn. Because prosecutors quietly hinted in the newest filing that the financial patterns connected to those Alias cards didn't just match Wendy and Eddie's spending habits. They resembled a coordinated system, something that would require multiple hands, multiple devices, and multiple people aware of the inner workings. Not one person, not even 2, but possibly a network. The filings don't say the word ring, they don't say organized group, but anyone reading between the lines, including legal analysts, can see exactly what the state is implying. The pattern of card cycling, luxury purchases, returns timed with travel, different IP addresses, and aliases with unique spending rhythms suggests something that simply doesn't happen by accident. And prosecutors know it. But here's the detail no one expected. Some of the suspicious transactions made under the alias Pam Oliver were executed at times when both Wendy and Eddie were provably in front of cameras. Meaning, if they were filming Ray Chop, then someone else had access. Someone else had the cards. Someone else had the accounts. And that someone is likely the missing piece the FBI is now closing in on. This is why investigators requested new subpoenas for additional devices, transaction logs, and digital activity connected to the couple's businesses, especially Happy Eddie, which prosecutors claim has multiple unofficial handlers who have not yet been publicly identified. This alone would be shocking. But then comes the part that made analysts freeze. The state claims Wendy falsely denied using PayPal, Venmo, and Cash App to acquire jewelry. Yet the Alias accounts show a different story. According to the filing, purchases were made on PayPal under Pam Oliver, refunds were processed through Cash App under E. Hennessy. Venmo records show luxury payments routed through accounts linked to Osefo household IPs. This isn't casual spending. This is digital laundering, the basic level form investigators often see in amateur fraud schemes. A way of moving money around to disguise origin, intent, or identity. And prosecutors are painting the picture clearly. If Wendy wasn't involved directly in these transactions during filming or while traveling, then she allegedly had someone doing it for her. That someone is what the FBI is now focused on. But that's not even the most disturbing part of this entire development. When the FBI stepped in, quietly, discreetly, without public acknowledgement, it wasn't because they assumed guilt. It was because the financial timeline was so irregular, so inconsistent, so layered with aliases and overlapping transactions, that they believed a much bigger operation could be hiding beneath the surface. Think about it. Why were luxury items returned before they were listed as stolen? Why were the alias accounts still active after the burglary? Why were multiple cards tied to different physical locations on the same day? And why were there transactions happening at times when Wendy and Eddie had cast alibis? These questions don't point to panic. They point to planning. Deliberate planning. For the FBI, the issue isn't whether there was a burglary. It's whether the burglary was part of a larger financial structure disguised as a household insurance claim. This is where legal experts believe the footage of a Wendy lookalike being escorted by agents may connect to something far bigger, something prosecutors are not yet saying publicly. Because if investigators believe a group was involved, not just the couple, that changes the entire stakes. It goes from insurance fraud, to conspiracy to commit fraud, to organized financial crime, to potentially even federal wire fraud if interstate purchases or returns are confirmed. And based on the nature of the transactions, many were. Meanwhile, the courtroom drama is intensifying. Judge Brian DiLeonardo, the same judge overseeing the subpoenas, is now pressed to decide whether prosecutors are entitled to every financial document tied to the Osefos' businesses, credit cards, online accounts, and luxury purchases, including the Alias transactions. Defense attorneys argue it's overly broad. They call it a fishing expedition. They claim it's an attempt to see what sticks after 18 months of investigation. But prosecutors countered with something chilling. The defendants maintain approximately 40 cards, some used under aliases, in a deliberate attempt to mask identity. This is not normal language for a routine fraud case. This is language prosecutors use when they believe there is intent, coordination, and planning. And legally, intent is everything. If prosecutors can prove intent, which they are clearly trying to do through spending patterns, alias accounts, and timeline contradictions, then Wendy and Eddie are in far more serious trouble than a staged burglary. But the most critical detail in the filing isn't about cards or aliases, it's about motive. Prosecutors state the excessive spending pattern is relevant to establishing motive. In other words, Wendy and Eddie were allegedly drowning in debt. Their businesses were allegedly struggling behind the scenes. Their household expenses allegedly skyrocketed. And the burglary claim allegedly came at the perfect time to offset financial collapse. That is the prosecution's theory. This is the foundation of their case. But then, in classic housewives fashion, the public detail contradicts the private reality. Because on RHOP, Wendy was talking about spending $100,000 on home renovations. Smiling, laughing, saying the business was thriving, posting designer outfits, hosting elegant dinners. Yet behind the scenes, investigators claim the couple was allegedly behind on payments, cycling credit, using aliases to hide purchases, moving money between accounts, and filing claims for items they already had. This duality, the public glam and the private financial chaos, is exactly what prosecutors believe will demonstrate motive at trial. But the trial itself may change drastically if the FBI decides the case is larger than local fraud. And that's why the footage of Wendy being escorted toward a federal building caused such a sudden, violent reaction online. Because if she wasn't being detained, if that wasn't her, if the timing was wrong, why did the rumblings inside the courthouse align so perfectly with what prosecutors are building? Insiders say the prosecutors' tone shifted this week. Their filings became sharper, more direct, less cautious, as if they now had something stronger, something more definitive than what the public has seen. And that brings us to the quiet line buried in the document that most viewers missed. Investigators anticipate additional individuals associated with these accounts. Translation: someone else is involved. Someone else knows the system. Someone else may be cooperating. And if there is a cooperating witness, then Wendy's situation becomes significantly more dangerous. Because that means someone inside the financial structure talked. Someone had access to the Alias accounts. Someone knows the spending behavior. Someone knows the timing. Someone knows where the bodies are buried. Financially speaking, this is likely why the FBI requested digital evidence tied to the Alias accounts, because Alias transactions often require device logs, IP addresses, login patterns, account recovery emails, verification, phone numbers, physical store footage. And the moment these pieces start matching, the case becomes airtight. But here's where things get even messier. Prosecutors openly stated that Wendy falsely denied using certain payment apps. Why would someone deny using PayPal, Venmo, Cash App? Unless investigators already had receipts? That kind of denial only makes sense when someone knows there is incriminating evidence hidden behind those transactions. And now, with these contradictions piling up, the state believes the Alias accounts weren't sloppily created. They were strategic, purposeful, part of a larger financial web that prosecutors are slowly unraveling. And at the center of that web, whether she admits it or not, is allegedly Wendy. And just when you think the situation couldn't get worse, new filings suggest that investigators have uncovered a suspicious shift in the timeline of the burglary itself. A shift that could determine whether the entire crime was premeditated. A shift we're going to break down in Part 3, because this detail changes everything we thought we knew about the Osefo case. And that suspicious shift in the timeline is exactly what prosecutors believe could make or break this entire case. Because according to the new filings, the Osefo burglary timeline doesn't just not add up. It fundamentally contradicts itself in ways that investigators cannot ignore. According to prosecutors, the insurance claim states that the break-in occurred on April 7th, while Wendy and Eddie were out of the country. Simple, clean, straightforward, until investigators cross-checked the claim with retail return logs, Alias account activity, digital timestamps, home security metadata, store surveillance tied to refunded items, and suddenly, the timeline shattered. Because investigators now say multiple stolen items were returned for refunds before April 7th, meaning they couldn't have possibly been taken during the burglary. And even more alarming? Some items listed as missing were purchased after the burglary, meaning the couple allegedly filed for reimbursement on items that didn't even exist yet. This is what prosecutors call a fatal timeline breach, something that points directly to premeditation. And if it's premeditated, it's not a misunderstanding, it's not a clerical error, it's not a mistake in the claim, it's fraud by design. But the most explosive part is buried in a single line of the prosecutor's filing. The state is now evaluating additional charges pending federal review of the timeline irregularities. That's why the FBI's presence matters. That's why the federal agents seen with a Wendy lookalike caused such chaos. Because if the FBI officially steps in, this stops being a Maryland case and becomes a federal one, and the penalties skyrocket. But the reason this timeline shift is so devastating is because it introduces a possibility no one wanted to consider publicly. The burglary may not have been staged badly. It may never have been staged at all. It may have been entirely fictional, as in, no break-in, no thieves, no damage, nothing. Just a narrative created to support an insurance payout. Investigators say the only evidence of the break-in came from the couple's own statements, not from physical proof. And when deputies searched the home after Wendy and Eddie were charged, they didn't just find some of the stolen items, they found 15. 15 items that should not have been there. 15 items that were refunded before the burglary. 15 items that should have triggered alarms the moment the claim was filed. This is why prosecutors insist the motive is financial, why they believe the pressure to keep up was escalating, why the excessive spending matters, why the 40 cards matter, why the aliases matter. Because the burglary story, the luxury items, the refunds, the alias accounts, the timeline errors, all of it fits together like pieces of a puzzle prosecutors now feel confident they can explain. And here's the quiet part that insiders are whispering. The more this timeline unravels, the more investigators believe someone within the Osefo circle may flip. A cooperating witness could turn everything upside down. That's likely why the judge delayed ruling on the subpoenas until December 2nd. He knows more information is coming. prosecutors know more evidence is on the way. The FBI is still actively reviewing digital logs. And Wendy? She's still publicly saying she'll tell her story when the time is right. But the truth is, if the timeline keeps breaking apart like this, the story might be told for her in court, piece by piece, transaction by transaction, alias by alias. What happens next depends entirely on what prosecutors uncover in these final rounds of subpoenas. And if federal authorities decide this case crosses into their jurisdiction, then this saga is only at the beginning. As this investigation keeps shifting, one thing is becoming painfully clear. What we're seeing publicly is only a fraction of what's unfolding behind the scenes. Federal agencies don't step in unless there's a pattern worth pursuing, and prosecutors don't request this level of financial detail unless they believe the timeline can be proven in court. So as we wait for December 2nd, as we wait for the judge's ruling, as we wait for the next round of filings, this story is far from over. If anything, we're just scratching the surface. The alias accounts, the refunds, the alleged timeline break, the FBI involvement, none of these are small details. These are the early signs of a much larger legal battle that Wendy and Eddie will have to confront publicly, whether they intended to or not. And the moment prosecutors move forward with additional charges, or if federal authorities announce their own involvement, the entire Bravo world is going to explode. So stay connected, because the next few days could change everything we thought we knew about this case. Make sure you're set up to get updates the moment this story develops. I'll be covering every twist, every filing, every court response as it comes in. This isn't ending anytime soon, and trust me, you don't want to miss what happens next.